story of Mary Ann in the chapter Sweetheart of Song Trebong is the story of a transition from Sigmund Freud's balanced ego to the primal id. In the following podcast, the character Rat Kiley will be played as Ben Gruber, the character Mitchell Sanders will be played as Lucas Nelson, and I, Jake Brooks, will be the narrator. Welcome to Lucas, Jake, and Ben's podcast. We start off at the end of the chapter Sweetheart of Song Trebong, where Rat Kiley and Mitchell Sanders are discussing Mary Ann's metaphysical journey through the psyche. Endowed by the spirit of Sigmund Freud, they are able to discuss it like IB English students.
And then, one morning, all alone, Mary Ann walked off into the mountains and did not come back. Well, there you go. That's the story of Mary Ann.
That's it. She did not come back. You've got the storytelling all wrong. The flow of it is all wrong. You sped up and slowed down all the time. What was even the meaning?
The meaning? What do you mean, the meaning?
You know, the meaning. Everything's got a meaning. It all means something.
The meaning's obvious.
The way you told it, it wasn't.
It's about what Vietnam does to that poor girl. Vietnam is alive. It changes you.
What do you mean?
Well, take Mary Ann at the beginning of the story. When she gets off that helicopter, she's just barely out of high school, man. She's got on this pink sweater, and she's carrying a plastic cosmetic bag. She comes out of the boonies just like that, pure and innocent, average, nice girl. Then take her when she gets out. She's like an animal. She's,
Primal?
Primal, exactly. She's primal, like an animal. Complete 180. She went from sticking out her tongue and acting Vietnamese to wearing a necklace of Vietnamese tongues. Those greenies got to her. Well, it is more than that. Vietnam got to her.
Her change was almost Freudian.
Freudian. Sigmund Freud was a late 19th and early 20th century psychoanalyst. He categorized the personality into three categories: the id, the ego, and the superego. The id is the part of the consciousness that controls primal instincts and dictates our passions. The superego is its opposite. It is your unconscious urge to resist pleasure and listen to the rules dictated by society. The ego is a sort of combined medium between your id and your superego. It is your conscious image of yourself.
Yeah, I guess it was pretty Freudian. Her transformation in Vietnam was an example of how the balance between one person's id and superego could just get so out of whack.
I agree. Throughout the story, we saw her ego completely decay, and the balance between id and superego disappear, and she became more and more desensitized to the events that took place around her in Vietnam, and her id just stepped in.
The experience of Vietnam made her primal side more and more powerful. For instance, at the beginning of her visit, she had to adapt to the Vietnamese lifestyle. I'm talking short hair, no cosmetics, poor hygiene, the works, man. She learned how to use a gun, but she was still just curious about learning.
She wasn't afraid to get her hands dirty either. She'd help out with injuries.
She just became more and more distant. Her and Fosse's relationship started to decay. Their formerly set-in-stone plans started to change. She didn't want the huge family anymore. First it started with, maybe we'll not have a lot of kids. Then, maybe we'll not have 3 kids. Then, maybe we'll not have 2 kids. Then she started spending more and more time going on ambush with the Green Berets, disappearing for days, coming back not saying where she had gone. The Green Berets, they had always been referred to by everyone as just much more savage. And she spent more and more time with them. I think that really symbolizes her change from balance to imbalance very, very well.
She eventually just went completely off the deep end. When you and Fosse entered the tent, you saw her completely succumbed to the id. She was at home in the dark hut. She had a necklace of tongues around her neck.
I remember that. She changed with Vietnam, and Vietnam became her home, where she belonged. And like she told Fosse, he didn't belong.
I think the story says a lot about Vietnam.
Little did Rat and Mitch know they were only fictional characters in a book written by Tim O'Brien. So as they began to discuss the significance of the story, they were actually also discussing the author's purpose.
Yeah, The nice girl in the pink sweater gives a really strong image of a normal, innocent person. And the primal, savage girl at the end just shows how Vietnam and the war can change a person.
People don't think of all these athletic men becoming soldiers as a change all that much. But we were all nice girls in pink sweaters at one point. We were all just normal civilians. And the story of Marianne just gives a feeling of how much Vietnam really changes someone.
And Mitchell was right. The story of Marianne's change seems different than the change of a regular man recruited into the army. He had interrupted earlier to argue that Rat was wrecking the tone and sound of the story. The author was trying to show how the way it really was for young men thrown into Vietnam just doesn't necessarily sound right to us reading the story. But in the end, it was just like Rat said.
The girl joined the zoo. One more animal. End of story.